Look at these books over here. Look at some of this literature. Now, I think I mentioned some time ago, that I have a small library. I am really not what's considered a schooled person, meaning I do not have documentation and records. I don't look good on paper when it comes to school. Attending schools, attendance while I was there, any types of graduations, anywhere from the 6th grade, from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, high school, college, none of that stuff, because my last completed grade was in the 7th grade. So I know a lot of times when I'm presenting information, I understand, I have empathy, and I realize that people, they say, well, what do you know? You only completed the 7th grade. That's true. But that's school. That's schooling. That's the building that we went to. That's the place that our parents sent us off to in the morning. It only worked for me a little more than a handful of years, but that's the place. I think there's a misconception between schooling and education, intelligence and knowledge, know-how and learning. I think there's some separations there. And being cognizant of that, being aware of that, you might want to slow down when you're judging somebody based on how much schooling they have versus education. I do consider myself somewhat educated because education is something that you can receive outside of school, just like your faith and your church. You know how y'all do. Jesus got something for me, but you ain't been to church in a while. The same idea. Y'all get it. But anyway, these books, these pieces of literature, I pulled them from my little library. I have a library of books, less than 100 books. I think about 72 books if I was to be technical. And most of the books are under 250 pages to 300 pages tops. These are kind of small books. I have some larger ones, but I don't read them as chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3s. And they're not novels in a sense. They're not documentaries. They're not folklore or classic literature pieces. I might have one or two. But for the most part, they are books or writings that I can go in and kind of peruse or highlight or focus on particular areas to assist me in the way that I learn, the way that I connect the dots about what my focus might be at the time or what my affirmations or confirmations may be. Meaning, if you look at some of this literature here, right? Over here, this yellow book or that gold book over to the far left or right, whatever side of the screen you're looking at, it says Drive. And that book is by a gentleman named Duhigg. I remember his last name. Crazy last name. What's his first name? The rest of the book's falls a cascading effect. Charles Duhigg. Yeah, Charles Duhigg. Yeah, that guy. And he talks about habits. And as I've said to people before, to me, habits, they get a bad rap. I think that habits get a bad rap. You know, when you think about connotation and denotations. Connotation, root word being to connote. Denotation, the root word being denote. So if you're familiar with those terms, you kind of get what I'm saying. If you're not familiar with those terms, you should look them up. Do a little research. Stop acting like you know what everything means. Stop acting like you can just read and listen in context to the world and continually to shortchange your sight. And when I say your sight, I'm not talking about your eyesight. I'm talking about your sight of wisdom, your sight of understanding, your sight of intelligence. Because to me, going back to habits, Charles Duhigg, He talks about they go to cascading effect. Cascading effect, aka the domino effect. When one falls, they all fall. We know that saying, right? Let me see if I can get this right. But one of the habits, and habits aren't good or bad, even though a lot of times we only hear about habits when we're talking about something in a negative sense. Yeah, habits don't get a fair play because it seems like, oh, you bringing that up again, Todd. You know, you have a habit of doing this and we have a habit of doing that. And it's always, or a lot of times, it's just something negative. It's not a bright thing. But it's how you process it. It's how you look at it. To me, habits in and of themselves, they're not aware. A habit is not a thing that exists with its own conscience. A habit isn't alive. A habit is not a creature. A habit is just not. A habit is more of a description or an idea or a practice that we have. It's some action that we as human beings or we identify other creatures have of a behavior, of a way of doing things. And it's done consistently over time. And it's done at a particular time or sometimes in reaction or reflex or in response to other things happening. Habits show up when we can identify a cause and effect. There's a cause, there's a condition, there's something going on, and our response, even though there may be 1,000,000, 1,000, 100 different responses we could have and other people have, my particular response seems to be consistent with maybe that cause, that condition, or something going on, and that's a habit. Maybe what I do without really some cause or condition being exerted or exacted on me as a catalyst or poking at me, maybe there's still something I do as a habit. Like one of the habits that I have is I get up early. One of the habits that I have is I like to learn. I'm really interested in vocabulary, words. Why is that a habit of mine? Because I understood years ago that it makes no sense for me to read something and hear things and act like I know what that word means. Act like I understand what it means. Now, for the moment, am I going to read it in context just to get an understanding, just to grasp kind of what's going on, that contextual reading? Yeah, for the moment. But I had to develop a habit that after I passed that moment of reading a piece of literature or listening to somebody, listening to you guys, and you insert or you use or you make me aware of particular vocabulary in something that you're expressing, whatever that is, then I'll go back and research it. I'll kind of make a note of that. I'll, what they say, pen that. And I'll circle back around and check that out. And I'll find it out because here's what I've learned. Here's the habit. Because keep this in mind about the habit. And Charles Duhigg is not the only behaviorist or psychologist or social scientist that can present information or books or literature about habit. We all know what a habit is. We might not write about it, but all of us are authorities on habits. We can describe them, we develop them, we can change them, we can just replace them, and different things like that. But the cycle or the life cycle of a habit, as he presents it and others do, is there's this initial thing. There's this poke. There's this awareness. There's something that happens, like a cue, C-U-E. There's this cue. And then after the cue, which gets your attention, there's this routine. There's this thing that we start doing based on this cue. And we do the routine, and then there's this reward. So we have a cue, get us going. We have a second stage, a routine. And then after the routine, we get this reward and it's repeat. Now, depending on who you're talking to, the piece of literature that you're reading, there's 7 steps. There's 8 steps. That's why people be killing me, man. Sometimes it's hard for me to understand people because they miss the point. Like the point I'm making here is about the habit. I've already said there's several authors, all of us individual are authorities on habit, and I'm just presenting 3 or 4 of the stages of habit that's presented in Charles Duhigg's book. And he's a white guy, because I know a lot of y'all, you got to hear from these white men, and I understand it, because you're hypnotized by this psychosis. If the white talk, I understand you think you know what you're talking about, but if you don't tell me as a white man, if you don't present the European to me, I can't take your word. I don't want you to take my word. I want you to do your own research. But I'm just letting you know this guy's white. Anyway, he presents a model of 4 or 5 steps. Somebody else might present a model of 8 steps. Somebody else might present a model of 12 steps. That's not my point. My point is, however nuanced they get, whatever the layers it is, however they taxonomize, in the form of a taxonomy that is presented, this branches, the branch logic, other things like that. My point is, there's something that initiates, provokes, and then it starts our habit, and we start this routine. And then this routine takes place. And then at the end of the routine, there's a reward or an outcome. Because a reward is kind of judging the outcome. There's this outcome or end game or towards the end life cycle of that routine, because we don't do it forever. It kind of ends. It terminates. We're finished. We're done for that moment. And so to say it's a reward is not fair, because that's a judgment of the outcome. It could be a disaster. It could be a monstrosity. It could be devastation, but it could be a reward. It could be an elevated feeling. It could be just a set of sensory experiences that's the thing that we wanted, okay? Today's Sunday, NFL season. A lot of you guys, we're going into our routines. We're going into our habits. We've already been queued up. We already been queued up by understanding the schedule. We already been going through our habits by deciding what meals we're going to fix, jumping on FanDuel and these other gambling apps that we can sit at home and do it. I don't do it, but I know a lot of people do. I don't even know enough about football to be making choices. I don't know the players like that. But the point of it is that Q has happened. We're in whatever week of the NFL. That routine has started. And that routine will continue throughout the day. Now, there's certain deviations, there's certain pathways throughout the day in the course of that routine. As your team wins, as you win your bets, as your team falls behind, as you maybe lose some of your bets, as you fix meals, the people that you're around, the people that you call and text. That's why sometimes you say, man, if the Ravens lose, my family members won't pick up their phone. If the Ravens lose, if I text one of my family members, they won't respond. Why? Because they have a habit that when they lose, they don't want to communicate, speak to nobody. And when they win, they got a whole lot to say. They welcome my phone calls. So these are just habits. And why am I talking about these habits? One, keep this in mind. When I'm over here on this platform, this is just rough draft, me running my mouth, saying more than I'm going to use. I'm just creating content, procuring it, just getting my ideas, putting it out there, because what I do is I download this and scrub through it and slice it up, edit it, and I produce it and I put it actually running on my YouTube channel. This is just the development area. This is where I'm practicing and I can say anything and turn music on and do whatever because I'm not using that stuff. So I'll run my mouth for 30 minutes and I'll use 17 minutes of it for my YouTube channel, which is really the goal. This is just a staging area. But so much for the habits. But keep this thing in mind about the habits. That's why, like I said, ignore me, things aren't in order. Habits, they get a bad reputation. But what I say is use your habits to your advantage. Yeah. Use your awareness about how you develop habits to your advantage. And you might say, well, I can't. That's difficult, Todd, because every time I think about a habit, I think about something negative, something maybe I shouldn't be doing. I think about a non-best practice. I think about something that I frown on. I think about something that makes me feel conscientious or almost guilty, self-guilt. I think about something that I feel like people judge me by, an action or a practice or a thing I do that, I just don't big up myself about. I understand that. Most of us do. I used to. I don't know more. I've been escaped and liberated and freed myself of that. But a lot of people do. We're uniquely the same. And people who do not anymore, such as myself, we know what that is. We was there one time. What you want to do is, well, I don't want to say it like that. What I did, I looked at habits, and I was subliminally infused and taught and trained that when we talk about habits, we talk about something negative. When we talk about habits, we're talking about bad practices. When we talk about habits, it's something you want to get rid of. I was subjected to the same thing. At some point in my life, a long time ago, like decades ago, a generation or two ago, I said to myself, I'm more empowered than I think. I am. I just need to be aware of me. I need to be aware of things that I can control, of choices that I think I'm making, even though it may not be me making the choice. It might be fate. It might be written already. That's fine. But I am moving through this so-called world, or this minutia of deciding and feeling and denying and rebelling and embracing and hugging and whatever. Like I do have some say-so. Like I do have a choice. Okay, if that's bliss, or if ignorance is bliss in that case, I'll take it. I feel empowered. If I am aware of what decisions I think I can make, then that means I can either curtail, change, reconfigure, rewire, or replace my current habits. That's what that means. And so I started doing that. And that's why I hold myself accountable for a lot of outcomes. I am where I am as a result of the sum of choices that I've made. That's how I look at it. That's why I'm where I am. A sum of the choices that I've made, good, the bad, the ugly, okay? Habits are empowering. We can use habits to empower ourselves. We can use habits to grow. We can use habits to our advantage. They can be a good thing. They can be a great thing. Habits can be a wonderful thing. It's just what the habit is that keeps us subjective, or how will we say it? Insubordinate, inept, dark, in the basement, underwater, below our base level of what we could be, what we want to be, our desires. It's our habits, but it's not the habit. It's the habit we create. It's the habit we have control of. We are the masters. We are the creators. We are the developers. We are the AI. We are the engine of the habit. If we believe that, if you understand that, if you are aware of that, Then you want to work on steps, decisions, and actions over time with consistency and practices. To what? Replace, change, and alter the habits. That's it. It's really not on somebody else. Now, are there supportive things, supportive ideas, literature, beliefs, prayers, meditations, and all of these other things that you can summons up, expose yourself to, and all of a sudden you're tearing down one habit, or you're tweaking out a habit, or you're replacing a habit. I try to stay away from deleting, because in my mind I haven't found a way to delete a habit. I've found ways of replacing a habit, of tweaking a habit out to make it do something else. That's why I say to people, don't try to delete the habit. Replace it. Tweak it out. Change it. Now, there's habits that I have I'm wonderful with. I have some very good habits. I'm great. I feel good about some of my habits. I'm free of thinking all habits are bad. That negative connotation, that negative denotation of habits. No. I can represent, I can qualify, I can share with enthusiasm, with interest, with passion. So be it. On some of my habits, I just can. So when it comes to habits, I just think it gets a bad rap because of how we typically hear about it in a negative sense. It's just not true. A habit is a habit is a habit. A habit in and of itself doesn't have morality. It doesn't have a conscience. A habit doesn't know right from wrong. The habit just is. We decide what those practices are. We decide the energy, what we exact on it. We decide how hard in the paint we go with habits. But once you are aware that we're the maker and breakers, we're the molders, we're the boulders of habits, then we can empower ourselves. Then we like habits. We can put habits on our team. Starters, head coach, habits. So much for habits, though. This piece of literature right here, this piece of literature right here, and that piece of literature right here, I'll go down the line. Charles Duhigg, Habits. Then we got who? This woman right here, what her name is, Dr. Joyce Meyer or something. There's a war and or on your mind is the battlefield. That's what this book is. There's a war going on and your mind is the battlefield. You think it's your pastor, it's not. You think it's your church members, it's not. You think it's your neighbors and the people across the street, it's not. You think it's your boss, your employer, it's not. You think it's your family members and your kids, it's not. You think it's your bills, your car payment, your mortgage, it's not. But there is a war going on for most of us. A lot of us have peace, or at least we're in a peace time. But for those of us who are in a war, and that's metaphorically, allegorically, some simile in there, it's going on in here. That's where the battlefield is. It's the battlefield of the mind. Joyce Meyer, she talks about that in this book. There's several other people that talk about it. You guys are familiar with that. But that's where it is. That's where it starts. That's where we do the processing of what's going on, the deep thinking, the meditation, the praying. That's where we revisit and recount and reconfigure and remake sense and don't make sense. That's where we do it at. That's where we commit and convict ourselves over and over again. That's where we judge. That's where we dismiss. That's where we punish. That's where we do all of those things. The war that's going on is taking place where? In your mind. Our minds are the battlefields. That's where our troops are. That's where the tanks are. That's where the missiles are, the drones, the satellites, the ICBMs. That's where they are. The battlefield of the mind, or the mind being the battlefield. See, a lot of this is just about awareness. These are ideas, schools of thought, thinkings that brings it back to us as individuals. That reminds us or rejuvenates or breathes a breath of fresh air. It doesn't make it go away, but that level of awareness, it you know, as Michael Jackson said, it's the man in the mirror or the woman in the mirror. It's in us. It's right there. This book right here, Drive. Who is this? Richard Wiseman or somebody? Let me see, Drive. Who is this? Oh, Daniel H. Pink. Yeah, Drive. And his thing is the surprising truth about what motivates us. Motivation, inspiration, condemnation, right? The opposite, the antithesis. But that motivation and drive, what is it that drives you? Drives me. What is it? What gets us pumped up? What inspires us? What motivates us? A lot of people say, and there's probably some truth to this, motivation is temporary. Motivation is like taking a couple Tylenol to ward the pain off. It does not in and of itself get rid of the pain. It suppresses it. Motivation gets us in a feel-good stage. But we still have to go to our thinking. We still have to process what that is. That's why when we're in front, you're in groups of numbers, and you're in front of a pastor or a thought leader or somebody that can speak, as an individual, it may not hit you as much. It just may not. But collective in numbers, when there's a lot of people that seem to have kind of the energy, the vibe, that they're there to hear a particular person, that they click to see, and it's numbers. That's why they say it's strength in numbers, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, because the strength in the numbers is not how strong all of the individuals are collectively in and of itself as a muscle. No, it's about the energy. It's about the frequency. It's about the tuning. If I'm on a frequency, be it positive or negative, and my frequency was translated by some AI device or some medical device that can make sound out of a detected frequency in my brain wave, like they do with dolphins and whales or whatever, it might sound like this. Beep, beep, beep. That might be what my frequency sounds like. Now, it's a harsh sound to listen to. I'm just giving you an example. That's what you might hear. But if there were 100 people in the room and we had similar frequencies, it might sound like art. It might sound like a choreographed song. It might sound like a welcoming, relaxing chorus line to a gospel piece or some classical piece, because of the strength in the numbers of anything that's alike or similar. It just has some wave about it that's greater than as an individual. That's why whenever you get in somebody and they're talking about war, destruction, or you get into somebody and they're talking about blessings and giving and humility, the strength in the numbers is the strength in the numbers. It just is. Because the strength in the numbers doesn't have morality. It doesn't know good or bad. It's just a strong frequency. It's just great energy. It just becomes synergy in some cases. So when we talk about drive and we talk about motivation, that's how we can get pumped up. We get pumped up, man. Damn, yeah. But what happens is, in the words of Snoop Dogg, it fizzles and dizzles my nizzles. What do I mean by that? It fizzles and dizzles my nizzles. That's what happens to motivation. It doesn't matter how great the speaker is. Once you leave those numbers and we go to our individual cubby holes or lives or routines or practices, it fizzles and dizzles my nizzles. So the question is, why get the B12 shot of the motivation? What purpose does motivation serve? What drives us? What is the drive? What is the push? What is it for if it's only so momentarily? It evaporates. Quicker for some than others. My thinking is, when I'm motivated, when I have drive, it pushes me or gets me going to the things that I have an interest about or a level of awareness about. It points me to it. It kind of recalibrates or realigns my why, my purpose. Or if it's something new, it says, hey, look, here you go right here. So it can be a make sense of. But the reason why drive is good, motivation works, is because sometimes it gets me out the gate. But the work, the practices, the studies, the walking towards that, exacting my effort and making the sacrifice, those are the things that really step me towards where I'm going, not the drive, not the motivation itself, because that's temporary. But it's needed. It's the I got you. It's needed. It's the you're not crazy. It's needed. It's letting you know. It affirms and it confirms that you on it. Don't worry about what they say. Don't worry about how it look. You dare. You're there. And I say dare, D-A-R-E. I mean there. So these are these little pumps, interlocks, slingshots, catapults that you here we go. You good. Keep that thing moving. And here's a reminder why. You wasn't sure whether to go this direction? Let me give you some options so you can see the purpose again. You can be reminded of. This your first time? Let me give you some make sense. So you can make sense, you can process it for you. But if we don't do the work, if we don't show the effort, if there's no measurable amount of go-get-itness, even if we're fumbling and tumbling and messing it up to get there, but something, then what happens is, back to my Snoop voice, it fizzles and dizzles my nizzles to the point that you forgot. We don't even know what that is no more. So we go back for another one and another one and another one and another one. And it don't do nothing. The reason why it don't do nothing is because you're not doing the work. And a lot of you people of faith, you know what that is. If you have a strong faith, I can't speak on it with authority, so just forgive me and bear with me and show some empathy about what I'm saying, because I'm out of my domain, I'm out of my space, because I don't do it, but I understand it from a distance. Whatever your religion might be, whatever your faith might be, I think you understand that there's something you go to and you get motivation. There's something that you go to and you're reminded of, or you're able to demonstrate or feel that drive, that push that's in you. And those moments where you go and see the imam or the pastor or whoever the Jews go see, and you get that motivated, you get that going, and it's strength in the numbers, and you're around the people of like minds, and there's synergy. SYNERGY. That speaks volumes beyond energy. But if you don't do the work and you don't do the practices and you don't exact your efforts and you don't sacrifice and you're not showing humility and you're not reminding yourself, then you're just getting a bunch of B12 shots. You're just getting a bunch of adrenaline shots. You're just releasing dopamine every 7 days when you go to church. Every 5 days when you go to the mosque. I don't know how many days the Jews go to the synagogue. If you're not praying, whatever your religion is, if you're not bowing down, if you're not reminded yourself through your practice or awareness, whether it's meditation, deep thought, your literature, or whatever, in between those congregations, whatever they're called, when you get together, strength in numbers, somebody of authority speaking, somebody well respected, the acknowledgement of who your like minds are about. Back to Snoop. It fizzles and dizzles, my nizzles. It just does it without meaning. It does it without purpose. It's like, what's the point? Why you keep going? Well, we know why you keep going, because it kicks in. You got to allow people to keep coming, because everybody, it don't kick in at the same time. But that's not my point. I'm not talking about at what point the engine starts. I'm just saying drive, motivation. Nothing's wrong with it. I just try to be mindful that when I'm watching things and I'm listening to people and I'm exposed to some blessings, that I keep in mind, okay, there's work to be done after this. There's some things I need to do to breathe life into this, to have some level of maturation, to grow out of this. When I go back for more motivation, when I revisit and be reminded of my drive, I want to have more than what I did the last time that I left. Or at least I want to recognize that I don't, and I need to realign myself, recalibrate, appreciate, humble myself, whatever it takes. Because it ain't about can't get right the first time or the second time. Some of us need 33 times. It's just what it is. So it's all good. It's all good with my man Daniel H. Pink. And then we have this group of people that tell the truth in their opinions, and they talk about, we don't deserve this. It's not fair. Absolutely. We could go on all day about what we don't deserve and what's not fair. In fact, this piece of literature right here, the name of that is The Undeserving Poor. From the war on poverty to the war on welfare. Now, I know a lot of you guys is 40 and under. You don't even know that term welfare. WELFARE. If you under 50, you might be agnostic to it. Agnostic meaning indifferent, disconnected, no awareness, you could care less or whatever. Welfare. But that's this piece of literature here. The undeserving poor. The war, how it went. The war from poverty to the war on welfare. No, I'm not here to argue. Yeah, but Tati, they say it was more white people on welfare. Listen, that's another post. That's another live. That's another stream. You're missing the concept. You're missing the principle. But the point is this, or at least my point is this. Sometimes we have to make sense out of this collectively. And not just this. That's my formula. You know your formula. But in this day-to-day life, living, giving, pouring back in, developing ourselves, we want to process. We want to make sense. We want to kind of look at the past, have a better understanding of the present, and make some sense out of where we're going and be more intentional and deliberate about it. Cool. Learning is one of those processes. It just is. How we learn. What's our method? What's our technique? What's our strategy? I know they seem kind of interchangeable, right? But there is a difference between a strategy and a method. Strategy is more high level, macro. You're up 25,000 feet and you have this strategy to do something. It's more conceptual. You can do some visual diagrams. Here it is. Here's where we are. Here's where we need to go. Methodology, your method, is low level. It's the hand-to-hand combat of how we get there. Strategy might be we want to get some literature. We want to look at some YouTube or some social, some platforms. We want to look at some authors, some authorities on subject matter. We want to get into some groups. We want to look at different domains and professions. We want to attend some seminars if we can. We want to maybe get some volunteers together and XYZ or whatever. That's strategy, okay? Methodology is go and select the books. Choose who and which YouTube channel we're looking at. Phone calls and emails directly to people that we want to volunteer or organizations we want to partner with or become part of. Techniques. All of this stuff. We have to make sense out of it. So again, just a small presentation about how I learn, how I consume information, how I process at some level what's necessary for me to be a better version of myself so that I can pour into those who are willing to receive it and make some sense.